Hello everyone. I'm glad to be here to my first video at xgeeks. So if you are new here, please subscribe in our channel and also check our website. So if you go to xgeeks.io, you can see several technology that we are working on right now. Our tech radar, and yes, the opportunity that you have on xgeeks. But anyway, we are not talk longer about xgeeks, and let's talk about Quarkus, right? So I guess that's why everybody here right now. Today we'll talk about Quarkus, coding that spark joy with Quarkus by a great friend of mine who is Edson Yanaga, Director of Experience at Red Hat. Hello, Edson. How are you?
Hello, Otavio, and thank you very much for having me here. And I'm twice as happy today because it's the premiere edition of your webinar, the xgeeks webinar. I'm talking to a very special friends, and I'm going to talk about Quarkus. Can't be better than that.
You can say the technology #1 in Java right now, right? The first video to the first technology in the Java world.
Yeah, I agree, but
You're not able to say that explicitly. But anyway, the show is yours. So with you, Edson Yanaga.
Thank you, Otavio, and again, pleasure to have you here. I decided to do something different today because some of you might have seen some of the talks talking about Quarkus. So I decided to do no slides today. It's going to be all about a live coding session. And while I'm talking, I'm going to try to share my screen right now. And if I do that properly, yes, just waiting for Otavio to put my screen on stage, and there it is. So this is where your joy begins. So you should be going to quarkus.io to see this beautiful website. You can see here in the center bottom of the screen, right now we have the Quarkus World Tour happening. We're visiting a lot of jugs trying to talk about the benefits of using Quarkus. And on the left side of your screen in the bottom, you see that Quarkus was just awarded the Stevie Winner Award as the best technology of the year. So yeah, there's another good reason for you to be taking a look at Quarkus. Okay, so since this is all live coding, and you should be starting your experience by going on the top right corner of your screen and clicking on the Start Coding button. And you can see that today Quarkus is on version 1.13.3.final. So Quarkus is evolving so fast, and by the time you're watching the session, probably Quarkus has already a newer version. So always check the website to see the current version. And the only boring part of this particular presentation is that I'll have to type the group ID and artifact ID. So I'm going to type con Red Hat developers and artifact ID. Let's type xgeeks. And here on the right side of your screen, you have a lot of extensions which are blasted dependencies for your Quarkus project. So if you choose an extension, you can be sure that your dependency will work super fast and super small with Quarkus, and we will also be able to compile your project to a native image using GraalVM. And since I want to show you the novel stuff, what we're going to do, let me try. I want to show you some new reactive stuff. So I'm going to add the REST Easy Reactive. Let me see if I can find it. REST Easy Reactive, and what else? Let's try to add a database because I want to show you the new dev services extensions. So it's going to be super amazing. And I'm going to add reactive MySQL here, the reactive MySQL client. And that's good for now. I'm going to download this zip file for my project. Then I'm going to switch back here to my terminal. And I'm going to unzip the file that I just downloaded, xgeeks. Okay, let me open my project in my favorite IDE these days, Visual Studio Code with the Java extension and Quarkus extension provided both by Red Hat. And if I open here, you'll see that my code generator already created this particular resource, like hello, rest easy reactive, and we're good. I'm going to, what else can we do? I want to show you the new feature of Dev Service. For example, I added here, I'm going to open my pwn.xml file. You note that in my pwn.xml file, I added the reactive MySQL client, which means that I added a reactive database driver that connects to a MySQL database. But suppose that I don't have a MySQL database running on my machine, and I don't want to install one, maybe I have multiple different dependencies or something like that, but I really want to do some database development very quickly, very easily. So how can Quarkus help me to achieve that? So just by doing that and by going here to my application properties file, if I just type this magic property, quarkus.database.dbkind, and I say, well, I'm going to develop using a MySQL database. And since I already have a database driver here, that doesn't matter if it's a JDBC driver or it's a reactive database driver, just like this one. This one in particular is the Vertex database driver. Reactive database driver. So just by having any database driver, JDBC or reactive in your pwn.xml as a Quarkus extension, and by adding this particular property, saying that we are going to use a MySQL database for development, if I switch back here to my terminal and type the magic words, which are mvn quarkus :dev, you see a very beautiful magic happening in front of your eyes right now. So pay attention. Right now, Quarkus is starting in development mode, which means that Quarkus will listen for changes in your file system or your Java files, and any changes will trigger a recompilation, a rebuild of your project, and a restart of Quarkus. And all of this will happen in a matter of milliseconds. And if you're looking through the log files that are showing up in my screen now, what is happening is that Quarkus detected, well, your project requires a database. That database is a MySQL database. And since I already have Docker installed on my machine, I can use containers for that. So Quarkus integrates with test containers. So if you go through the log files here, you see that what happened is that you can see some Docker keywords happening here. Well, Quarkus detected that. Quarkus downloaded the Docker image. Quarkus created a new container instance of my MySQL database. Quarkus connected to that, and everything is already working out of box. You can see that Quarkus already checked my database connection, issuing a select one statement, and everything is ready. My project's ready to run queries against my database, and I didn't have to configure anything like username, password, or anything else. But what about production? Well, you should be configuring your database properties for production, and usually these properties would be provided by environment variables or Kubernetes config map or secrets. But just in development mode and testing mode, Quarkus will automatically spin up a new database container instance by leveraging this technology called test containers. Okay, you can see here that MySQL 8024 is already running, and this is my particular container instance. So everything ready for me to create my very first database, Quarkus database application. And what else can we do? If I go here, localhost 8080, yes, my new cloud native application is ready. And if I go to this particular endpoint, hello, rest easy reactive, yes, you can see this endpoint that is already running here. And if I open here, you can see that since Quarkus is running in dev mode, I can see hello, xgeeks, geeks. And I just save the file, go back here to my browser, refresh, and hello, xgeeks is already on your screen. And remember, we have a database running inside a container. Everything's happening behind the scenes. Feels like magic, but it's just pure technology just to give you joy.
Whoa, that's amazing, Edson. We have one question from the audience, Gabriel Rodriguez. Thank you to the first chart. It's possible to use Podman instead of Docker?
Well, right now, the only integration that we have with Quarkus is Docker. So you would need a Docker demo running. Actually, it's one of the checks that you have when Quarkus starts to see if you have a Docker daemon accessible from your project. And if you do, it will create your container. So no Podman running yet, only Docker daemon.
Is there any expectation to the preview feature? I mean, next release, next month?
For Podman?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm not the Quarkus product manager, so I can't tell if they're going to prioritize the Podman extension or not. I can tell that Docker is already working today, and Podman really depends on how many people ask for this feature. If you're really interested in running your containers without Docker just by using Podman, maybe it would be interesting for you to join the Quarkus mailing list or go to GitHub, create the issue or vote on if an issue already exists, so people can see that, well, we need Podman support, and maybe the engineers will take a look, and on the next version of Quarkus, we will already have this feature.
Oh, nice, Edson. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question. Amazing question. If you have anything else, please post on the chat. Otavio is monitoring, and I'll be more than happy to be able to answer all the questions if I have the answer, or else I can ask. So you see that Quarkus is already running in development mode. What else can we show you? Let's try to add some database stuff to my application. So the easiest way for us to do that is to create a new file. So if I tap developer.java, we're going to create our very first entity, and say at entity, oops, but what happened? I don't have this particular class on my class path because I forgot to add the additional dependencies for me to be creating JPA applications using Quarkus. But don't worry, since we're already running Quarkus, all I have to do is to go here through my VS Code extension and ask to add more extensions for my Quarkus project. So what are we going to do? I want to do some Hibernate Reactive. And not only Hibernate Reactive, but also Hibernate Reactive with Panache. And just in case you're not yet in the reactive world, everything I'm doing here works with the traditional imperative and blocking way, but I'm using reactive just to show you the novel way of developing applications, but you have the same joy, doesn't matter if you're using reactive or not. And actually, because we are using reactive, REST Easy Reactive, you can code, you can program your traditional like synchronous blocking endpoints, imperative blocking endpoints in your code that Quarkus will automatically detect. If your code can be optimized and can be translated to reactive, REST Easy Reactive will do that automatically for you in a transparent way. So you can use the same code that you're used to using traditional JAX-RS, and behind the scenes, Quarkus will optimize and translate that to reactive stuff, even without you noticing that. Right, so you can benefit from the reactive stuff, even though you're not doing any real reactive programming. But today we're going to mix and match. We're going to do, at least for the first example, we are going to be reactive all the way. So I just added Hibernate Reactive. Let's see, maybe I want to also add some OpenAPI, and I added the JDBC driver. And since I want to use some reactive, I want to return some JSON. So let's try to add some REST Easy Reactive JSON B. So we can return some JSON and we should be good. So I hit enter. You can see that my Quarkus extension is just calling the Maven plugin, which is going to download those extensions for me. And build success. You can see that here, emojis for the win. And everything that happened here in front of you was just adding these particular dependencies in my pom.xml file. As I mentioned in the beginning, extensions are just blasted dependencies that are tightly integrated with the Quarkus ecosystem, so we can make sure that your dependencies, your libraries, will run optimized for Quarkus, which means that they will be super fast and they will be super small when running in production. Okay, so dependencies already added. So if I just try to complete here, yes, I already found it, and traditional JPA would require me to type boring private long ID and @id or @generated value. But since we're using Panache, which is a novel API, Panache allows us to create active record style entities. I know that in the Java world, you are used to repositories. You can do that. We are going to do that in our Quarkus application. But project first, I want to show you the novel way. So in this case, I'm going to show you the active record style. So we're going to extend Panache entity and give a name, private string name, and then generate barring, getters, and setters. But since we're using Panache, I can type just a public field. So you don't have to, it's not required, but if you want to, Panache allows you to code like a public field, but run like a private property, which means that at build time, so there is no performance penalty at runtime, at build time, Quarkus is going to translate this field to private and generate the getters and setters automatically for you. So it can work and behave well with all of the Java Beans frameworks that you are used to. Okay, so I have public string name. And what else it's missing? Well, maybe I need to create my database. So I'm going to go back here to application properties, and I'm going to tell Hibernate, Quarkus, Hibernate, database generation. I'm going to say, well, Hibernate, drop and create the database for me. And because unfortunately, we still don't have a schema update for the database generation, I'm going to create drop table if exists. Developer, I'm going to create an import SQL statement. So in dev mode and test mode, it will automatically generate the database and then populate the database for me. And create table developer and ID big int primary key auto increment and name varchar 255. And let's insert into developer name. And let's add some values, which is I'm going to add myself. Then I'm going to add, Otavio, not two Yanagas. And I think Gabriel made a question for us, and we should be good. So I just did that. I created a table, inserted some developers. I create the entity, which is a one-liner, practically just a property. And let's create a developer resource. I'm going to create developer resource.java. And you see how simple it is for you to create a reactive endpoint using Quarkus. I just have to type path/developer, and I can return public like a multi. Instead of returning a list, I can return a multi of developer, and I call this developers. And I can say return developer dot stream all, and I add at get. And that's it. We already have a get statement. Remember, no database running. I just created a database automatically using test containers. I created my table, inserted some stuff, created my entity, and created my REST endpoint. So now let's test it. So if I go here, localhost 8080/developer, you should be able to see Yanaga, Otavio, and Gabriel. Whoa, amazing, isn't it? Well, I think it is. And I hope you enjoyed this reactive stuff. So reactive all the way, we can see it, it's already inserted. And what else can we show you? So we have a reactive database all the way working already. I think another amazing feature that we could show is that how to create repositories using Panache. And since we're using Hibernate Reactive, which is the novel way, by the way, right now, Quarkus is the only framework that allows you to use JPA or Hibernate Reactive all the way, because the Red Hat team is creating both Quarkus and Hibernate and all the amazing stuff in the Java ecosystem. We have everything integrated from bottom to top, and the opposite is true, from top to bottom. So you can be reactive all the way with the same features that you've been using with the Java world in the past 20 years. So Hibernate Reactive only with Quarkus so far. And what else? I don't like this Panache thing. I prefer to use repositories. Don't worry, you're covered as well. So you can, let's create a developer repository here. Developer repository.
Edson, while you're typing that, is there one question from Clayton Diaz? It's possible to use JPA implementation? instead of Panache entity?
Yes, you can. Actually, I'm showing Panache because it's a different way. But if you want to use just plain node entity managers and injecting the entity managers, you are covered. You are free to do that. Okay, you don't have to use Panache. I'm just showing you that it's an option. Just like if you're using the Spring framework, you don't have to use Spring Data. You can do everything by yourself. You can inject entity managers and use just the traditional JPA features. You are covered. You don't have to use Panache. I'm just saying that Panache is a novel way that allows you to do the same things, maybe in a more productive way, but it's a choice. Quarkus doesn't make you to follow strictly the Quarkus programming model. You are free to use any way that you are used to. Well, we're just showing additional ways of doing the same stuff. Okay. And thank you for the question. And what we're going to do here, creating a repository if you want to use Panache. You don't have to extend Panache entity. They are completely independent. So you can do public class developer repository implements Panache repository, and you just create a repository. You have the persist, merge, update, the finder methods already available for you. And even if you want to do some custom finder methods, you can. So if I want to say find by name string, and you pass the name, for example, or you can just find the Japanese Brazilian here. You can do that as well. So you can say return find, and just say, well, name and equals to name. You should be string. You are covered. So I created a custom finder methods here in addition to all the other finder methods that we have, and it's already working in a reactive way. Okay, because it's Panache reactive, we are returning a multi. If we were using just traditional Panache, we would be returning a list. So it's an option. You don't have to be reactive, but if you want to, you are already covered with Quarkus. Okay, and what else? Well, here I could add, for example, a query parameter and say that let's find the Japanese and Boolean Japanese. I usually do Brazilian, but since Otávio is Brazilian as well, so it wouldn't be unique. So if Japanese return, and let's inject the repository, developer repository.
Maybe you can do a Brazilian who lives in US, so you'll be unique right now.
Yeah, it could be like a Japanese Brazilian that lives in the US, then that's a more unique combination.
Whoa.
And yes, I changed it. And remember, I didn't restart Quarkus yet, but I refresh here. Yes, it's still working. And if I just add this parameter here, Japanese equals to true, you're able to see that it's filtering and it's only returning myself, which supposedly I'm the only Japanese on the list. Okay, cool. So we have repositories, we have reactive, we have Quarkus, we have Panache. Everything is working out of the box. And yes, if you wanted to use an entity manager, it would work for you as well. What else can I show you? Well, we could do something like this. Let's go back here to my IDE. And who here is a Spring developer? I'm pretty sure that if I made a poll here and ask you to raise your hands while you're watching the session, most of you would be raising your hand saying, well, I'm a Spring developer, I'm a Java developer, and I'm also a Spring developer. Luckily, I'm also a Spring developer. I dedicated my entire career to creating Spring Framework applications. So we're using Spring Framework since 1.0 beta 2. And I was later using Spring Boot as well. So I wrote the Spring Boot Ride, Spring Cloud, all of this beautiful stuff. But then now I'm amazed by this Quarkus development feature, this amazing development mode. I also want to be able to create some native images that are super small and super fast and are easy to configure. So a question crosses my mind. Can I still reuse my existing Spring skills, but still be amazing using the new Quarkus development framework? And the answer is yes, you can. So what are we going to do right now? We're going to add some extensions, which will allow us to use the Spring APIs on top of Quarkus. So let's add here those extensions to my project. And I'm going to add here Spring. So let's add Spring Web first and Spring Data, which is one of my favorite APIs as well. And just by doing this, you see that, let's download that. Okay, I have Spring, Quarkus Spring Web, Quarkus Spring Data JPA. It's already here. So let's try to do the same thing that we did right now with Panache and REST Easy Reactive using Spring and Spring Data. So they are going to be equivalent. And because using Quarkus, you can mix and match. You can inject a Panache repository in your Spring controller, or you can do the opposite. So since you're using Quarkus, you're all covered. You will always be super fast and super small. Okay, and what else can we do here? So let's create a Spring developer repository. So if you ever use Spring Data, so this needs to be an interface, and I'm going to extend JPA repository, and it's going to be a developer and along as an entity. And I can create a custom finder here as well. Since Spring here, like Spring Data is not reactive, then I'll need to do this the traditional way, the imperative synchronous blocking way. So we're going to return a list. So yes, if you want to be reactive all the way, you need to use Quarkus and Panache. But if you want to be synchronous, you can use Spring Data. So list developer and developers. Oops, find by name, string name. Okay, so I just created this repository, and now I'm going to create a developer controller.
Edson, one more question from Gabriel. Does Quarkus or Panache have any integration to generate the database migration automatically? For example, Linkbase?
Quarkus supports out-of-box both Liquibase and Flyway, which is my favorite, but it's just a matter of preference. So we can't generate the migrations for you, nobody can, but we can automate the migrations for you. So as long as you're creating the SQL statements or by using Liquibase, if you're updating the proper XML files, Quarkus can manage those migrations for you, but you still have to create the migrations by yourself. And why is that? Because we can't manage the state of the database schema for you. But as long as you're creating your database migrations, you can automate everything with Quarkus. Just have in mind that using those tools, Liquibase and Flyway, inside your application, it is a good practice only if you're running a single instance of your application to production and that you don't have a proper fully automated software deployment pipeline. If you have a software deployment pipeline that can automate the database migrations, that is the best place for you to run those migrations. Okay, so even though Quarkus can do that for you, just like you can use Flyway with any other Java framework, like using Spring, it's not a best practice, okay? The best practice for automating database migrations is to add an additional step to your software deployment pipeline and run those migrations there, okay? So yes, we're covered. We don't recommend you to do that. It's better to apply those migrations to the software deployment pipeline, but if you want to, Quarkus can do that for you, okay? So request mapping, and here I'm just creating a traditional Spring. So I'm going to spring-developer because I already have a /developer endpoint. And this one is going to be the get mapping and public list developer. Let's add the developers. I also request parameter Japanese. Okay. And let's add an auto-wired here. So Spring developer repository. and return developer repository dot find all. And if Japanese, oops, Japanese, return developer repository dot find by name. It's going to be Yanaga. Okay, so you can see is the same equivalent code. Here you're using the Spring APIs. Here you use the JAX-RS APIs. You will note that the JAX-RS version, the REST version, is even shorter than the Spring version. You can see here it's one line less. Not that it matters, really matters, but it's one line less. And you're good. So, and remember, I didn't restart Quarkus yet. And if I just refresh here, oops, just because I said it's Spring-developer. It's not working. Yeah, just because I mentioned that Quarkus didn't restart. Sometimes when you add too much at the same time or something like that, your Quarkus development mode can break. But for you to be able to solve that, it's super easy. You just stop development mode and start it over again. Okay, so we're going to do that again. And Quarkus is going to start another database using test containers for us. We just have to wait a couple of seconds, and it's taking more time than usual because we are using test containers and we need to start our new database. So we just wait for that, and is taking longer than expected, especially because I have to wait for Quarkus Rest Easy. Let's see. Oh, I think it's complaining it didn't work, and I know why is that. You know what? The Spring APIs that we have here, they are not reactive. So you can't use JPA in a reactive way. So unfortunately, what I will have to do is that I'll have to use a JDBC driver. So performance will suffer. You can use the Spring APIs, but since we can't have the Hibernate reactive all the way, you still have to be synchronous and blocking. That's what Quarkus is complaining this time, and it's good, but I just note that, well, it's the first time that I'm mixing reactive and non-reactive Spring, traditional Spring with the Quarkus reactive APIs, and that's why we have this problem. So let's try to fix that. How can we fix it? I'm just going to create a new project here. So mvn io Quarkus. I'm going to create a new project on the fly. 113.3.final and create. Okay, my bad. I didn't notice that we were mixing reactive and non-reactive stuff. And con Red Hat developers. And I'm going to do like xgeeks -spring. So unfortunately, if you're using here, I want the Spring Web, Spring Data. And I also am going to use, that's it, I can add more later. So just have in mind, sample code, oops, oh, Spring Data JPA. Let's create just create with the basic one, and I can add more later. Con Red Hat developers and xgeeks-spring. And yes. So xgeeks-spring. I'm going to open my IDE again.
Edson,
yes,
I have a good question to you.
Please.
Clayton, that's a good one. If I have a project that depends on a EAR or other products, do you think that migrating such a structure to Quarkus, can I speed up my project today? I mean, EAR is something like a little bit older, right? So I think it's Java E5. I'm not sure.
It's Enterprise Archive. So if you use a NIR file, you're aggregating other EAR files and some WAR files in a single deployment file. And I suppose that, I'm supposing that if you're using EAR files, you are using Enterprise Java Beans as well. Well, Enterprise Java Beans are not supported by Quarkus, but you can easily migrate most Enterprise Java Beans to just application scoped beans in Quarkus CDI. And for the persistent style, you probably should be using JPA anyway. The only feature that I know it's blocking, if you're using stateful Enterprise Java Beans, Quarkus doesn't support that. And it's a bad practice anyway. So most of the code is portable. But if you're using EAR files, depends on your EAR file, you might have a lot of projects aggregated in just one big file. And you can migrate to Quarkus. Yes, there's no blocking issues on this path. You just have to pay attention that we don't support EJBs, so you would have to change some annotations and a bit of the code. And we definitely do not support stateful session beans. So if you do that, you have to rewrite those particular parts. Okay. But and thanks for the question, Clayton. I know here it's super legacy, but yes, you can modernize your infrastructure and be super happy still by using Quarkus.
Can we use JMS with Quarkus in WebSocket?
Yes, you can use WebSockets. I might be able to create a sample application here if I have the time. And what else? You can, for JMS, you can use ActiveMQ in your project. And let's see here. So let's see if we have a JMS extension. Yes, we have the Cupid JMS. So yes, we have extensions for JMS. You are covered. You can use Artemis, you can use Camel, you can use MQP with the Apache Cupid dispatcher. So you are covered. You can use JMS in your Quarkus application as well. Yeah, so probably the question, does Quarkus support this or that, is that if you have an extension, for sure, you can use Quarkus for that. If you don't have an extension, if you're running on top of OpenJDK, your library will work with Quarkus. Your library might not be as fast and as small as the rest of your Quarkus application, but it will work. If you want to compile your Quarkus project to a native binary image using GraalVM, the answer will be it depends. Okay. And actually, while we're coding here, let me try to show you some other new feature. So I'm going to create another project. MVN IO. Actually, let me see if I have here remote. I'm going to generate this project again. So MVN IO Quarkus Maven plugin. And let's create another project so you can see the benefits of using native images using GraalVM. Red Hat developers, remote version, rest easy, yes. Okay, so remote. So if I just stop, so if you ever used the GraalVM before, know it's a super slow process, and it can take forever for you to be able to configure and to build successfully your project. Luckily, if you're using Quarkus, you can be certain that your project will run in native mode, because Quarkus takes care of all of the cumbersome configuration that you might have when trying to use GraalVM in your project. And you can do that just by enabling the native profile. So I'm going to try to do that. MVN package, I enabled the native profile. Let's see, running the tests. Quarkus by default integrates with JUnit5 and Rest Assured, so you can have your integration tests running. And now the Quarkus Maven plugin is going to invoke GraalVM. So yes, it's already running. It's going to take a couple of seconds. Like in a good day, when I'm not doing live streaming, it takes 40 seconds for me to be able to compile this project. And why are we doing that? I'm going to go back here to my IDE and copy paste the code that I did So what I need to do, I need to copy developer and developer controller and Spring developer repository. I'm going to copy these files.
Okay, let me see if I understood correctly. Are you saying that Quarkus is lighter than Google Chrome?
Much more. All right. Well, Quarkus is a blessing. I can tell you that I did some Node.js development in the end of last year. And I can tell you that Quarkus is by far much faster than Node.js development. Once you get used to development mode, where you don't have to restart, you just save the files, go to the browser, refresh, and everything is automatically there. You can see that the Quarkus development experience is much faster than using Node.js and JavaScript. And just to add another data point, my son, he is a freshman. He's taking a computer science degree here at UNC Chapel Hill, and he was learning, and all of his colleagues and friends are using JavaScript. But I taught him Java, and I taught him Spring Boot. I taught him Quarkus. He's a Quarkus fan because, according to him, Quarkus is much more productive. So he's using Quarkus, and he now joined the startup. So his boss told him, "Oh, you should be using JavaScript because it's much faster than Java." So he tried to do some JavaScript, and after doing Quarkus, he just told his colleagues that he's switching to Java because, well, Quarkus is much more productive than using Node.js. It's much less code and it's much faster. So 2 data points. You might take that with a grain of salt, but from my opinion, it is true, and you should try that by yourself.
Okay, that's me surprising face.
You should be surprised, but you'd better be amazed because everything I'm doing right now is to make sure that you can go to the Quarkus website and create the project by yourself. And you see that I'm not lying. Quarkus is the most amazing thing that happened in the Java space in the past at least 15 years. And I know that Java is going to be relevant for the next 20, 30 years. Java is going to be on the top of the programming languages and platforms because of innovations like Quarkus. This Quarkus changes everything. And while we were talking, I'm pretty sure that my native image already finished. So if I come back here, well, I'm live streaming. I'm using Google Chrome. It took 3 minutes. Oh, that's forever for me to be able to compile this native image. So if I go back here to target, and you see that what I have here, I have this remote runner. This is a native image. You can see that it's executable. So let's try to run it. So I'm going to run this project, the runner. And since it's Java, I can add some parameters. So I'm going to run this Java project with a 6 megabyte heap size. And I tried to run that with 4. It didn't run. But I'm pretty confident it runs with 6 megabytes of RAM. And I need to switch the ports because my other project's running on 8080. So let's run on 8081. So let's run it. Yes, Firewall, allow that. You see that because I'm doing this live streaming today, my Quarkus project started in only 36 milliseconds. In a good day, it should start in 14, 16 milliseconds. But did you ever wonder the day where your Java project would be able to start in only 13 milliseconds? Me neither, but this day has arrived because of Quarkus. Let's see if it's working. I can go back here to my browser. Localhost 8081. Yes, my new cloud native application is working. And let's see how much memory it's consuming. I'm going to open here. Pass grep runner. And my Quarkus application, everything included, heap memory, non-heap memory, threads, stacks, and all of this is consuming only 21 megabytes of total resident set size. It's not on the heap. I'm using a 6 megabyte heap size, but your Quarkus application is consuming total 21 megabytes of RAM. This is using raw VM, but if you use in OpenJDK, you'll be super fast and super small as well. I always tell people that with Quarkus, you only have 2 options. You can be super fast and super small, when running with OpenJDK, or you can be even faster and smaller if you decide to use GraalVMs. You only have these two options, okay? And people are using these features, both Quarkus and OpenJDK and Quarkus and GraalVM, in production today. So if you want to be stable in production, like feature rich, with amazing development modes, today you can do that with Quarkus. You can join companies like Vodafone, like Lufthansa, and many other companies across the globe that are using Quarkus today and are being super happy. So being a Java developer has never been more exciting than today because of Quarkus. You don't have to wait for anything else anymore. You can be super productive. You can have joy. You can use Quarkus to develop your project and deploy that into production. Okay, so we did that, and let's just me finish here my project. My Quarkus. So this one is the Spring project. I just want to make sure that it's running. So what are we going to do? We're going to add the Spring, the Spring Web extension and Spring Data extension. If I didn't do that before, I also need a JDBC driver. So we're going to add the JDBC driver, and that's it. So we're running the Maven plugin. So it's working. Let's open the application properties file. Quarkus. See, it's still loading. There is a lot of things happening in my machine right now, so it's a bit slow. Okay, now the source DB kind is going to be MySQL. And Quarkus Hibernate database generation is going to be drop and create. And I forgot that, but I can copy the import.sql as well here. Yes. So we should have the same developers. So I just copy pasted the code from my project. Remember, here it's Panache. It's not Panache in Reactive anymore, it's traditional Panache. So that's all that I needed to change here. All right, let's
Edson,
import it again. Yes.
Does Quarkus work with the Spring properties? For example, if I decide to migrate my application to Quarkus, can I use the same properties to define database, passwords?
No, you can't. You have to use the Quarkus properties. But there is also a tool called Migration Application Toolkit, which is also provided by Red Hat. You might want to take a look at that. And I think that the migration Migration Application Toolkit will help you when trying to translate the properties. Okay, I think it helps you with that. And I think we're covered. Yeah, I hope that's all that we had to do. I'm just going to add here Quarkus HTTP port. Let's run on port 882 so we don't have any conflict, and we're good. I'm going to switch back here to the terminal and mvn Quarkus :dev. Let's see. It should be detecting my database and spinning up another MySQL container. So we can run. And I can tell that I'm so used to waiting for nothing that when it takes like a couple of seconds to be able to start up because we're doing this live streaming, I just get bored. So we're waiting for my MySQL database to be running. We're almost there. Here you can see that it's waiting for the MySQL database to be ready, because once we start the database container, it takes a couple of seconds to be able to be ready and listening for my connections. So we're still waiting for MySQL to come up. Now it's ready. So it's listening. So let's go back here and go to localhost 882/spring-developer. And yes, it's already there. And I just type here Japanese equal Japanese. If I type it correctly, Japanese equals to true. You can see that's returning only Yanaga. So you are running the Spring APIs on top of Quarkus. Another common question, but Yanaga, does it mean that you are running Spring on top of Quarkus? No, we're not, because you wouldn't benefit from doing that. Because the Quarkus part would be super fast and super small, but the Spring part would be as fat and as slow as traditional Spring. So what we're doing when we're adding the Spring dependencies on top of Quarkus, we re-implemented the Spring APIs on top of Quarkus so you can keep being super fast and super small. So if you think about the Spring APIs in annotations as just a way for you to provide some metadata to your application, that's what we're doing. We're reading the metadata from the annotations and we're re-implementing the behavior from the Spring framework on top of Quarkus. And Spring was carefully designed. They're using only interfaces. So what we did with Quarkus, we just created the implementation behind those interfaces and it's already running. And we support Spring, Spring Data, Spring Data REST, Spring Security, Spring DI, Spring Web. And if your favorite Spring API is not yet supported, please just ask on the Quarkus mailing list or open a GitHub issue. You might be surprised, because if enough people think it's interesting for the Quarkus team to implement those Spring APIs, they will be doing that. So it just needs your help, your contribution. So we did that. What else? So Spring is running. We have Reactive all the way, also works. What else can we do? Let me try to show you another feature. I want to show you how can you easily get your Quarkus application packaged inside a container and deploy it to a Kubernetes cluster. So what do we need to do that? I'm going to go back here. So I'm going to stop this project for now. And I'm going to open this remote project because it's the easiest one. I'm going to open here another IDE instance. So lots of things happening at the same time here. So we have this greeting resource, which is returning hello REST easy. What are we going to do? I want to deploy this application to Kubernetes. So what do we need to do? We're going to add here Quarkus. Oh, it didn't detect as a Quarkus project yet. So I think now it did. Quarkus, add extension. So the first step for me to be able to deploy my Quarkus application to a Kubernetes cluster is I need to generate a container from my application, and then I need to generate the Kubernetes YAML files. But both steps are super boring. I would need to create a Docker file and type YAML. Nobody deserves that. So can Quarkus help me to achieve that? Yes, it can. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a container image Docker. You can use jib if you want to. And I'm going to add the Kubernetes extension as well. Okay, so just by adding those two extensions, I am almost ready to be able to deploy my Quarkus application to my Kubernetes cluster. And as the last demo of the day, I'm going to do some remote development mode inside my Kubernetes cluster. So pay attention, because this amazing feature that I'm developing locally here with the stuff, can you do that remotely? Yes, you can. So that's what we're going to do right now. I just need to type some configuration properties here, and I just need to type here Quarkus, and let me VS Code catch up with the properties. You can see in the bottom right corner of the screen, like the spinning wheel, it's waiting, it's loading the properties, and I have so much stuff happening right now that is super slow. Quarkus. So I need to type the Quarkus container image dot group. It's going to be Yanaga because that's my username in my repository. Quarkus container image dot registry. I'm going to use key.io, which is a free container registry provided by Red Hat, and container image dot name is going to be Sparks Joy. Okay. And since I want to use the remote development mode, I'm going to add some additional properties. Quarkus live reload.password is going to be sparkjoy. And Quarkus package.type is going to be mutable jar. And Quarkus Kubernetes env.vars is going to be Quarkus launch dev mode equals to true. And if I type it everything correctly, we are good to go. So just by doing that, I can go back here to my terminal and type the magic words mvn Quarkus mvn package and enable this particular property Quarkus container image dot push equals to true. So when I enable this, Quarkus is going to generate automatically a container image locally. It's going to push to my repository. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. I know we're almost on the top of the hour. What? Stay with me, bear with me, because we're almost there. We just need to create our container. Yes, my container is being created already using Docker. You can see by the log messages. And it's installing. Oh gosh, I forgot to do this process today. So it didn't download the latest dependencies, but don't worry, we're doing that. I don't have anything cached yet. So it's downloading the stuff, it's installing in my container image, Java. And what else? Still running. Yeah, just because I mentioned as I'm talking, everything takes longer when you're watching it. Yes, but at least you can see the whole process of downloading the dependencies of your container image, installing the stuff in your container image, and building. So yes, image was built. I'm now pushing my image to my repository in key.io or quay.io, depends on where you live. If you're from the UK or Australia, you would be pronouncing these words like key.io, but if you're in US and pretty much everywhere else in the world, you can say quay.io and you're covered. So we're pushing the image. It's taking more than I expected, probably because of my internet connection. Let's see. Pushed, and it's done. So my container image is already there. And if you go here to my Kubernetes.target, Kubernetes YAML, you can see that, yes, Quarkus generated all the YAML stuff, generated a service, a deployment, and if you need probably a service account, no, not this time. So if you want to deploy this particular application, all you have to do is do this. I'm already connected to a Kubernetes cluster. It's an OpenShift cluster running on Google Cloud. So just let me make sure that I'm connected to the right one. Yes. And let's deploy kubectl apply -f target kubernetes.yaml. Cool, right? And I can say kubectl get pods. It's creating. I can watch. It's downloading, like right now my Kubernetes cluster is downloading the container image from key.io. As soon as it finishes, it's going to start my Quarkus application. And it's already running. So I could create an ingress, but I know that the easiest way for me to be exposing the service is by using OpenShift. And if I say kubectl get root, and I copy paste this URL, let's see. Stay with me, I'm almost done here. So yes, my new cloud native application is ready, and hello REST easy. Yes, it's returning hello REST easy. Cool. Now let's see the magic happening. Now I'm going to go back here to my project, and I'm going to do mvn Quarkus remote dev mode, and I'm going to Quarkus live reload.url is going to be HTTP and this one. And what I'm doing here is that my Quarkus development mode is going to connect to my Quarkus application running inside my Kubernetes cluster. And why is that? Because sometimes you have a lot of dependencies already running in your Kubernetes cluster. You have a test database, you have a broker, you have a cache service, you have other microservices running in your Kubernetes cluster. So you can't properly test your application if you're developing locally on my machine. But with the Quarkus Remote Dev feature, you can test your application inside your Kubernetes cluster. You can see here that it's already connected. I'm going to open here. Here you can see my local IDE is saying hello, REST easy, hello xgeeks inside Kubernetes. And I just save the file, go back here to the browser and refresh my application running inside Kubernetes. Quarkus is recompiling, sending the changes and restarting, and everything is already in your screen. How amazing is that? Well, for me, it's pretty amazing, and you can do that in Kubernetes. You can do that anywhere. You can do this remote stuff anywhere. I just shown because it's super easy for me to deploy my application inside Kubernetes because Quarkus automates everything for you. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I know we are already out of time, and thank you very much for staying with me until now.
Thank you, Edson. That was amazing. Is there any more question? Please let us know. The Kubernetes things is like, wow. But is there any security issue about that? I mean, my local application can access a remote application?
Well, there are some requirements for that. It was fast, I don't know if you note, but I had to type as password in my application properties. So you need that password to be able to connect. And you also need to provide a special environment variable to your application running inside Kubernetes. So if Quarkus detects that environment variable, then only then Quarkus will start in remote dev mode.
Okay. Thank you, Edson, again. That was an amazing meeting. And if we are around here next week's YouTube channel, please subscribe, give your like. And next week, we will have Valerie Moraes to talk about native image in Java.
Okay. Thank you all. I can see the comments here. Thank you very much for coming and have an amazing rest of your day.